And so I thought the other day, I'm going to write an article. I'm going to go into the poorest county in California and the poorest city, one of the poorest in the poorest county, Selma. And I'm going to the Walmart and I'm going to count the first 100 people I see, and I'm going to ask 4 questions. Do they have a Bluetooth in their ear? Do they have a cell phone? Do they have an iPod? Or do they have a BlackBerry-like device? I found 7 who didn't. I walked out in the parking lot and I said, I'm going to count the first 20 cars and find out how many are older than 2005 and are not over 30,000. I couldn't find more than 6. It's a funny sort of depression. And there's national stimuli going on, and it seems to me we're in a recessionary period, maybe comparable to the Reagan-Carter recession. But the idea that we were in a Great Depression, I don't think was persuasive, but it was persuasive that you had a greater philosophical plan. And I think, before I would say what that plan is, it represents certain principles. And there are 2 or 3 that are pretty obvious. One is that the hardware store owner, the taxi cab owner, the family dentistry practice, all of these people are sort of bumbling in the dark. They have all of these wild agendas that are pretty much focused on themselves, and they need to be united and directed by a government. Technocrats, people who went to Harvard Law School or Yale Business School or Stanford, these people know much better. And they can create federal programs that will guide us into particular types of behavior, whether it's smoking or the environment or how we treat our work. We ourselves are not capable. That was the first thing that I think is already being reflected. And the second is that compensation is inherently unfair. That a man who's outside Pepperdine and maybe decided in high school he wanted to drop out and he's gardening, or somebody who said, you know, I don't like the rat race, I'm going to drive a cab, take people from Malibu to the airport. These people are getting a wage that's not comparable to people, many of whom have parents in this room who are doing quite well. So if you went and got a degree and you were a surgeon or you were a financial advisor and you're making $300,000 and $400,000 a year, what is the logic that allows you to get that and somebody who works gets much dirtier, much sweatier, much more tired and gets $12 an hour? So in this way of thinking, classical economics will say either life is unfair and there's tragedy inherent because we all are not equal, either by ability or by fate. Some people inherit, some don't. Some people get extra years of expertise. They have a skill that the market needs. Other people don't have that skill and there's more. These are the classical apologies for the inequity in wages. But if you don't believe in those, then, and the best apology and the best, I said, exegesis is that's the only way you get skilled people to do certain tasks, by a sort of united sense of self-advancement interest. But if you don't believe that, then you believe the government has to step in and redistribute the wealth. It's never really your wealth to begin with. It's the collective wealth. And so Mr. Obama is promising to raise income tax. Let me just make a side here. I had a very unfortunate experience 2 years ago. I was in Libya speaking on Roman mosaics, and I got a ruptured appendix. Bad to get a ruptured appendix, it's worse to get it in Libya. And I came within about 6 hours of really almost biting it, so to speak. But I got into a Red Crescent clinic, and a person put me on a table, 2 scalpels, a tank of ether, and said, good luck. And I woke up alive. But the point I'm making is, when I asked him about the primitive conditions, no analgesics, no painkillers, no assisting at it, he said, well, why would we have it? I make the same as a person by law who's cleaning the floor. Think of that. The surgeon makes $200 a month. The janitor makes $200 a month. And I asked him why, and he explained this entire philosophy to me, which is, I think, radically akin to what we're witnessing today. How did that work out? Get back to the original point. So you scare the electorate that you're in the Great Depression, and then you embrace a philosophy that, for want of a better word, I would say, gorge the beast. I was skeptical in the Reagan years when the Reaganites said that they wanted to starve the beast. Remember what that was? You cut taxes from 70 to 28, and then until the economy picked up, you might have decreased revenue, and that would force the Democratic Congress. This is very naive. not to borrow because they wouldn't have any money, so they'd have to cut useless federal programs. That was the idea behind it. In fact, I know a lot of proponents who to this day make very persuasive arguments that it worked, that it kept federal increases to 2 or 3%, or otherwise they would have been larger. The Obamaites have adopted that philosophy. It's called gorge the beast, and it's the exact mirror image, and that is immediately why the electorate is stunned in the first 5 weeks, and you've told them the depression is coming, and it's horrible, and that all these terrible things. Then you, under the guise of stimulus, you borrow, and you borrow for health care, you borrow for cap and trade, you borrow for environmental things, you borrow for community organizing, you borrow for beekeeping, you borrow for tattoo removal of people, gang members. You do everything. And after you do this, and you get $850 billion and another $600 billion, you end up not with Bush's annual $500 billion, but with $1.5 trillion. And therefore you gorge this thing so large, the only way you can do it is to what? Raise taxes, which was your intent in the first place. At least half of your intent. Because again, the philosophy is it wasn't their money to begin with. They were arbitrarily compensated. It's not true what Mr. Obama said, that he was going to return tax rates simply to the Clinton era on the top brackets. Clinton era was 39.5, but Bill Clinton in his wildest, I don't want to say wildest, but one of his wilder dreams did not contemplate lifting the limits off FICA, Social Security tax, or readjusting some of the deductions. If you live in California like us and you see this tax rate going above 10%, and you add, some of you are self-employed, 15.3, and you add 39, and Medicare tax, you can see it's very easily, you can very easily end up with 67, 68% of your gross income paid to the government. That is a radical shift, and when you combine that with a fact that we're approaching now that 50% of the people are not directly engaged in constitutional government because they don't pay federal income tax. They have no stake in how it's spent because they're not contributing federal income tax. This is a radically different approach. It really is. And so I think that's the first thing that we are seeing, that we are seeing something that we haven't seen in our lifetime. We've only read about under Franklin Roosevelt. And again, it suggests that the money's not really your own. The government knows how better to spend it, and that rather than you paying, say, 50% of your combined income and then doing horrible things like buying a Mercedes or putting in a hot tub, the government can take that money and more wisely use it for the common good. I think that's pretty much the philosophy that we're seeing. The second thing is foreign policy. And we were immediately hit with a few facts, some of them good, some of them bad. Throughout the campaign, we were told that George Bush shredded the Constitution, and that we had gone into, I think in Mr. Obama's inaugural address, he said, no more, we have that devil's bargain. We either have to shred the Constitution or you can fight terror. We don't have to go there. But the funny thing was that although he had said the Patriot Act in as early as 2004 was shoddy, he kept it. He said FISA, he'd vote against it, and he didn't. He said renditions were violation of American principle. He kept them. He said Guantanamo was awful and he had to close it. So did George Bush. 2006, George Bush said, I want to close that damn thing. I don't know what to do. There's no other alternative for a while. All Obama said, we're going to close it, and then he appointed a task force and said, we'll look at it in a year. So he kept a lot of the Bush security protocols, which suggested that they weren't quite shredding the Constitution as we thought.